Welcome back to the class, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about roster building once again. About a week ago, we released a video talking about the top 32 teams out there in the game that you can build up towards, and while that was great, one of the concerns raised in the comments was, hey, this is cool, but this is going to take me 3 years to get all these teams up. So that being said, today's video is going to be about the fastest farms in the game. We're going to take a look at the top 6, or at least in my opinion, top 6 fastest teams that you can build almost instantly. Obviously, nothing in this game is instant, but we have a way of knowing how to farm some of these teams super quick because of the way that CG has kind of lifted some of the barriers. So before we actually get into looking at the exact teams, what are the requirements for them to be one of these? I'm not just going in and picking some random team that I like and that I think is cool. Again, if you want to check out the top 32 teams that I think that are still super relevant, not including GLs, go ahead and check out the video over there. But in the meantime, we're going to be talking about this one. So first rule for the fastest team that we need to be farming, it has to be relevant. It doesn't matter at all if I sit here and tell you that Ewoks and Phoenix are really fast farms if they can't really beat all that much. Next up, the shards need to be accelerated. There are a lot of really cool teams out there running around, but when one or several of the characters needed to make the whole faction work are still slow farm, it makes it really hard to go after them, or at least it doesn't make them really hard to go after, but it makes them really hard to consider a fast farm. Inquisitors right now are a pretty great faction overall with everything considered, but not all of them are accelerated yet, and it's going to take you a really long time to farm them. Again, if you're trying to go for a fast farm, they're just not it. Low or next to no Kairos. This is another one because as of last year, CG has actually made the vast majority of gear from gear 12 and below, except Kairos, much more farmable. They've doubled the rates on it, so it's a lot easier to come by. So there are, again, really good teams out there like Bad Batch, who you want to go after at some point, but they're not a fast farm because each and every one of them needs to 200 to 300 Kairos because they're all such new characters. And another thing, when looking at a fast team, you can't really work with legendary change. What do I mean by that? CLS is a good example. The CLS is an amazing team, beats a ton of stuff. You should go after it at some point. But that being said, I think 3 of the characters, depending on how you build it, are either raid or legendary. So again, it's something you're going to build towards up to in a wider plan, but at the same time, you can't look at your GAC board and think, okay, I'm now in a Rhodium, I need a new team. It's going to be that one because it's going to take so much planning. That being said, we do have quite a few teams that do fit this list overall, and let's go ahead and get to them. So first and foremost is going to be our Iden team. I've talked a lot about Iden over the last couple months and pretty much how much I love her and how great her team is, and she just does amazing things even at low gear, and that is really relevant to this because while all 4 of these characters here, Death, Storm, Snow, and Magma Trooper, they're all really old characters. You can farm them. They're very accessible. None of them have huge amounts of Cairo all the way up to leading up to them, and none of them are really involved in a legendary farm, and none of them are legendaries themselves. As far as how Iden is going to work here, one thing that I am going to suggest if we're going to consider this a fast farm or a fast team that you can build again for GAC or whatever it may be, is you need to leave Iden low. Because while the rest of the team kind of fits this example of, you know, they're accelerated shards, they don't use a lot of gear, they're not trapped behind anything big, Iden actually does have a lot of Cairo in there. And this is a good stepping stone. You can get her to maybe gear 8 or whatever it is that you need her to be at before you actually go ahead and work on her more. She does have a really fantastic ship that we don't know if it's getting nerfed right now or not. But that being said, she's still out there, and her team can beat really relevant things even at lower gear levels. You probably do want to, and you, by you I mean I, want to take these characters up to low relics at some point. They can beat almost any Mon Mothma that I've come across in 5v5. 3, if they struggle a little bit more, I'm still not too concerned about Iden's gear, at least as a character herself. Again, for the ship, it's probably a pretty good reason. But as far as the character goes, she just keeps on reviving and reviving and reviving. So I'm not super sold on having to have her so much higher. That being said, you could really farm this team in a month or 2 just with everything that you have to work with as far as the requirements goes. Next up are going to be the Geos. The Geos, again, we're looking at a relevant team. They're very important to be able to get Watt, and even in the GAC board, they can be used on offense to beat teams like BAM, or even just be on a defense to call out your opponent's empire or something of the sort. They're all no Cairo characters. Different from the last team, not a single one of these requires Cairo's below gear 12, which is actually just a little bit weird. Because Geonosian Brood Alpha, for those who remember who were there years ago, he actually came on after Kairos had entered the game, and he's one of the very, very few characters that has come out since Kairos had come out that didn't need a very large amount of them. And again, he has a lot of endgame viability on his own because of the way he has essentially a auto reviving, or I guess summoning rather, tank that can be used outside of that. So overall, really good team, and it's again something you can build up really quickly. If we go in and we look at all the farmable locations for them, they're all on like Cantina. This one's really stinking low, which is really easy to gear, especially if you're not putting a lot of relics into them right away, like I'm not. 12 energy, or he's even in the Galactic War Store. You can probably get Poggle in a number of weeks rather than months because of that, as well as Sunfac, who is actually in the guild store, it looks like, through a few other ways as well. So again, a team that you can build up pretty quickly that can be used to help fill those holes that you have in your roster for whatever reason, both in PvE and in PvP. Next up is going to be Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn, it might just be the cheapest team here. Similar to Iden, he is going to need his Omicron for GAC. It is fantastic. But other than that, this team really works with just like Jedi Knight Anakin at gear 13. You can like farm the shards and the gear for these other three characters. These are not, by the way, the only three characters that work here. You can use a low star cam, you can use a GK, you can use an Ahsoka. Doesn't really matter. Just make sure they're GR so that you don't lose Jedi Knight Anakin's damage bonus. But really, with the way Qui-Gon's lead works is they're going to get stuck behind one of these ones. Typically, the AI loves to attack whoever is the weakest, so they won't go after these two guys right here. And then Jedi Knight Anakin just gets to rip the team apart. And he doesn't even need super high relics himself, because all of his damage is still based off of this lead, giving speed, or rather giving offense based on speed, meaning that you don't need a lot of raw offense that's actually coming from this, and this doesn't even add speed, so it ends up doing a lot for you in the end. So it's something that you can build up super fast. Jedi Knight Anakin is now a starter character. Qui-Gon's gym farm is also super accessible. Not a lot of Kairos needed at all. Oh yeah, so he's under Cantino Bata, so if you're going for, let's say, Geos or something else right now, when you're just getting a lot of that currency building up, Qui-Gon is a great option to go for in that regard. So again, we have just a bunch of teams that you're able to build up with really low investment, or not even necessarily low investment, but a low amount of time coming into it. Next one up, and this one's a little bit hard to get into because this is probably the only team on this list that I myself didn't do, and that is Nightsisters. Nightsisters, again, they share some of the viability of the of Geos, where they're needed in a lot of like random PvE events. You need the Mother Talzin, or at least in some form, so that you can be able to get Zetas from her event, which happens every month. It is really nice. Even I've been doing it for years now, and I still don't feel like I have enough Zetas for everything. You do need a Saj yourself at one point, at least at gear 12, to be able to perform in the gas mission, so that's another thing you have to build up for. And it's really nice just to have them kind of where I have them right now, at gear 12 with Doc at R5, because this allows you to beat the 2 tiers of the assault battle they have and actually get a lot of nice Pyro as well as signal data from that. That being said, they're also just a super easy farm. All of them are accelerated. All of them are pre-Cairo. None of them require anything really ridiculous. Mother Talzin can be farmed on Harno, but as well through that other event that I mentioned. So you have 2 sources for her shards. Old Doc herself, I believe, is on one of the old currencies as well. I think Asajj is too. They're just super accessible, and they can still beat a lot of things in the mid area of GAC. Again, using the example, if you're in Chromium, moving up to Rhodium, and you need another team to fill that spot, and you just need something fast, this is one of the great options here. Asajj's Omicron, I don't have it myself because I think in my area she really needs to be at relics for it to be any good, but it's also pretty decent. Her being able to decrease her entire enemy's max health and protection as the battle goes is pretty darn nasty. Actually, looks like max defense and health, which is still pretty good. That being said, another option for one of the faster teams. Next one, this one's going to be a little bit interesting because we're going to break our rules just slightly, and that rule is Shaak Ti. Shaak Ti is a newer character, and while her shards are accelerated, she still requires a lot of Cairo. And she's the only one that does, but the rest of the team is just so good. And again, none of them, all these are fairly easy farms. They're available in multiple areas. I believe Rex is mostly available on the fleet shipments. Arc, it has his own lower Cantino node himself. If you can get them all built up, give them all the gear they need. Again, no Kairos included. 5, if I remember correctly, does have a lot of Carbonchi, but with that being accelerated, it can, again, be considered a faster farm. And I mean, these guys are just needed for everything later down the line. The primary thing being the cam mission, and really even outside of that, gas with them, they just become such a force to be reckoned with when it comes to PvP. They're really arguably the strongest team outside of Galactic Legends, what I consider pseudo-Galactic Legends, aka Starkiller. They are just so stinking good. So definitely food for thought. The only thing to keep an eye on is, if you're low on Cairo, you're going to probably want to have to lean into one of the other suggestions, because Shaak Ti needs a lot of it. And unfortunately, while her lead is pretty cool, you want her to stay alive for most of the battle, whether it be on offense or defense. And last but not least is going to be our Veers team. And we're going to have a similar caveat here than we had as well back in the Iden Versio team, where you can build up this team, and if you want to do it quickly, you're going to have to leave Piet at a low gear level, or probably Moff Gideon too. And that's not the end of the world. If you have a pretty fast Stark, he can get up well into the 300s if you're willing to give him more than, what is this? A plus 13 mod, for example. And then he can go first, and then really, the Imperial Troopers, they can be almost at any gear level, and they will still run over a ton of teams that they're faster than. As long as you can get Stark, or I guess Piet and Gideon will be a little bit harder to get them in front of someone if they're still gear 8. And that's kind of, again, the goal. This isn't just about good teams, it's about which teams you can farm quickly. And you can farm Stark pretty quickly up to where he is, as well as giving him a bunch of gear so that he can get all the way up to those speeds. And as long as they can go first, they will run over so many things, including just things that are just way tankier than they are. I remember back when I had like gear 11 or gear 10 troopers, I was consistently running over relic bounty hunters, because as long as I could get first and get a kill, they would go down. So that is going to be the end of the video for now. These are the 6 teams that I think best fit the fast farm. I believe most of these could probably farmed in maybe 2 months, if not a little bit longer. Some of the shards do come through kind of weird things that you have to keep an eye on. Sunfac being one of the primary ones, because he's in guild event currency, and I don't think he appears every single time there, so that is something you do have to keep an eye on, as well as you kind of know your guild currency. Maybe you can't be spending it all on Carbonti, or you have to figure out which raids you have to hit in order to be able to make that happen. But that is going to be it for today, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments, and as always, stay awesome.